It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
All right, Curly Q has asked, should I be investing fully into my Roth 457B instead of a Roth IRA? His investment options and fees are good, and there's no penalty for early withdrawal. This account just seems more versatile than an IRA. Is this true?
So, Brian, it's really interesting, right? So he obviously works for an employer that doesn't make available a 401k or a 403b. There's a 457, which is unique. I think it'd be interesting for you to weigh in on the uniqueness of 457s. And then some differences in what happens with, what you can do in a retirement account versus what you can do in an individual retirement account inside of an IRA.
Yeah, 457s are unique. By the way, not everybody can have them. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's one of the things you need to understand, because when you hear how great like the early access is, you're like, whoa, why does my employer not have that? I can tell you Abound Wealth does not have a 457 because typically there has to be some not-for-profit, government. You see these type of, these are special account types that are set up. That's why you'll see them with, where we talk about the big opportunity is a double up opportunity for like hospitals or universities, where you'll see that the doctors who work there who are in high income situations can max out a 401k and also max out the 457 because it's two completely different sections of the IRS tax code. So they got to, instead of having 120,500, these people who make these high incomes can really take advantage of some huge opportunities. But that's not what Curly Q is asking. Curly Q is specifically talking about, I know it sounds ridiculous saying Curly Q.
It's hard to take you seriously when you're...
So Q here, because I have a friend I call Q all the time, so it'd be like I'm talking to my close friend. So Q, the question here that we're talking about is Roth 457 versus just a Roth IRA. Mm-hmm. Now remember, 457s, and Q kind of put this out there, you don't have the typical IRAs we know require you to be 59 and a half.
Yep.
401k is 55 when you have a separation of service. So it's interesting when a 457, it has no early withdrawal dates. And that's why you see it. I love it when you see police officers, firefighters, and others who have 457s, because they're typically retiring sooner than a lot of the rest of the workforce, because they get their 30 years in and they have these pensions. But it's interesting because I can't remember what word Q used, but they said that they had good investment options and flexibility of choices, because that's typically why when you look at the financial order of operations, step number 5 is the health savings account, the Roth IRA. And the reason we put those as step 5 versus step 6, which is max out your retirement, is because you control which custodian you work with, which investments you put in there. You have maximum flexibility on what you're choosing. So that's why it's typically the best option, is because it's not uncommon that your employer might have their golf buddy set this up or something like that. But you went ahead and said you've done your due diligence and you have great investment options. The other thing I would just put a little word of caution on why I still like Roth IRAs a little bit is that if you ever have a separation of service, you realize anything you need to do with that account, you're probably going to have to go through that employer, whereas Roth IRA, once again, you are the complete control of that situation. But I don't see a problem. It's one of those things where I would love, if I had my Weathers, I'd love for you to do both.
Sure.
Because then, that's financial mutant crazy. If you get a 25% savings rate and you can get through step 5, which is load up that Roth IRA, and then go to step 6, where you then start loading up the 457 or whatever your employer plan. But it's not a problem that if you have great investment options. I'll let you kind of throw a little color on that.
Yeah, this is a really hard one, and we're getting into like splitting hairs here.
Yeah.
There's 2 things I'd encourage you to do. I'd go look at the total costs of all of my 457 plans. So what am I paying as a participant in the plan for the administration of the plan, investment advisory services on the plan, whatever those things are, and figure out what it costs. And then I'd compare that to the cost of buying low-cost index funds inside a low-cost provider in a Roth IRA of my choosing, right? So a Vanguard, a Fidelity, a Schwab, a fill in the blank of whoever we want to use. Odds are doing it on your own in an IRA is likely going to be less expensive just because there's not all those overlays that typically exist in a 457. But even if you do that analysis and you have robust investment options and you could go either way, there is one extra little thing where I think the Roth IRA gives me a slight edge. And this is something we never want to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
This is something we never
Break
like to
glass.
bring up. But Roth IRAs do have this break glass in case of an emergency feature where you can always go in and get your basis, the money that you've put into it, penalty-free, tax-free if you have to. So if you've been building up a Roth and you did 5,000 and 5,000 and 5,000 and 5,000 through years, you could go back and tap that as a piggy bank if you had to. Now, you out there, you listeners, you'll never have to do that because by the time you're putting money in your Roth, you already have a fully funded emergency fund because we know that you're following the food, so you won't actually need that. But it is there as like an emergency escape valve, whereas if the money's in your employer-sponsored account and you're still working there, might be harder to get there unless they have like loan provisions or something like that. So because of that, I'd go get on my match. I'd double back. I'd max out my Roth IRA, and then I'd double back to the 457. I think, just kind of thinking through the foo, that's the way that I would tackle that.
So I love, because I like that little robot vacuum cleaner. I turn it on when
The
we have
Roomba
guests coming out.
or whatever,
Yeah,
yeah.
we turn it on and let it run around. And it does a pretty good job. I feel like I was the original, but then you're the person that comes around and picks up the robot, puts it right next to where there's dust that it keeps missing. Well done. You're kind of the remote control feature that they put on the Roomba.
You know what? Okay.